My wife invited her affair partner to our wedding anniversary until I exposed them both. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. I smiled, raised my champagne glass, and looked directly into the eyes of the man sleeping with my wife. The crystal clinked against a silver spoon, ringing out over the low murmur of 30 of our closest friends and family members. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. The room was bathed in the warm, golden glow of candlelight, reflecting off the polished mahogany tables and the teary, joyful eyes of my in-laws. Everyone thought they were here to celebrate a milestone of enduring love, the kind of romance that survives the modern world. They were wrong. They were here for an execution. My name is Mark. For the past half-decade, I believed I was the luckiest guy on earth. My wife, Chloe, was the center of my universe. She was beautiful, driven, and charismatic, a woman who commanded attention the second she walked into a room. And I, a solid, dependable project manager, was more than happy to build the foundation that let her shine. I paid off her student loans, handled the mortgage on our beautiful suburban home, and made sure she never had to worry about the mundane details of life. I was the safe bet, the anchor. But as I stood there at the head of the table, listening to the soft jazz playing over the restaurant speakers, my stomach was a block of ice. I looked at Chloe, radiant in her emerald silk dress, her hand resting delicately on my arm. She beamed at me, the perfect picture of a devoted wife. Then, my eyes drifted past her, locking onto Julian. He was leaning back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips, holding his own glass in a mock salute. He thought I was a fool. He thought this whole party was a grand, twisted joke that he and Chloe were playing on the boring, oblivious husband. For weeks, they had been laughing behind my back, sharing a secret language of stolen glances and hotel sheets. I had spent the last 28 days swallowing bile, playing the dutiful partner, and meticulously preparing for this exact moment. The folders were hidden under my chair, thick with undeniable proof. The projector behind me was primed and ready. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy silence settle over the room as I cleared my throat. I was about to burn my entire life down, and they never saw it coming. To understand how we ended up in this beautifully decorated dining room on the precipice of disaster, you have to understand who we used to be. Chloe and I met in college. She was a fiery marketing major with big dreams, and I was the grounded guy who made sure she remembered to eat during finals week. When we stood at the altar 5 years ago, she gripped my hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. She promised me forever, her voice cracking with raw emotion. "You are my rock, Mark," she had whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I could never do this life without you." I believed every single syllable of those vows. For the first few years, our marriage was a true partnership built on my unwavering support of her ambitions. When she landed a high-pressure job at a top-tier firm, I took over the household completely. I cooked the meals, I did the laundry, I managed the finances. I wanted her to soar, and she did. We bought our dream home in a quiet, leafy suburb, the kind of place where you know your neighbors and host summer barbecues. It was the picture-perfect life. Have you ever looked at the person you love and realized you're staring at an absolute stranger? The shift didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, insidious fade. About 6 months before our anniversary, her energy entirely changed. The woman who used to burst through the front door and excitedly recount her day started coming home quiet. Her responses clipped and emotionally distant. She was always exhausted or stressed about a campaign. The physical intimacy, once passionate and frequent, dwindled to obligatory pecks on the cheek. I tried to be highly understanding. I drew her baths, bought her favorite flowers, and suggested weekend getaways to help her decompress. "I just need space to focus, Mark," she snapped one evening, waving away a brochure for a cabin retreat. "Not everything is about us and your clinginess." I swallowed the hurt, assuming it was a phase, a temporary shadow over our otherwise sunny life. I convinced myself that if I just loved her harder, if I just gave her more room, she would eventually come back to me. The truth was already festering right inside the walls of our supposedly perfect home. The first true crack in our foundation appeared roughly 2 months before our anniversary party. We were sitting in the living room, surrounded by caterer menus and floral arrangement options. I was trying to keep the guest list small and intimate, restricted to family and our oldest, dearest friends. Chloe, however, was staring intently at her glowing phone screen, barely paying attention to the expensive choices I was laying out. "We need to add Julian to the list," she said casually, not looking up. "Who is Julian?" I asked, genuinely confused, my pen hovering over the heavy cardstock. "He's a new senior account executive at the agency," she replied, her tone perfectly even, almost rehearsed. "He's been incredibly helpful with the new regional campaign. It would be rude to leave him out when he's basically saved my quarter." I frowned, feeling a strange, cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Chloe, it's our 5th anniversary. It's 30 people. We aren't even inviting your cousins from out of state, and you want to invite a coworker you just met?" She finally looked up, and her eyes were surprisingly hard, defensive. "It's not just a coworker, Mark. It's about networking and optics. Besides, he's a good friend now. Why are you being so difficult about one extra plate?" I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the wife I had known for years. There was a sudden frantic energy about her, a desperate need for this man to be included in our private celebration. I reluctantly added his name to the bottom of the list, telling myself I was being paranoid. But over the next few weeks, Julian's name became a constant, suffocating presence in our home. If she was late, she was grabbing drinks with Julian and the team. If she was texting furiously at midnight, she was brainstorming with Julian. The casual way she dropped his name was designed to make me feel secure, but it did the exact opposite. Every instinct I possessed, every primitive alarm bell in my brain, began ringing loudly. My gut screamed that this slick man was a serious threat, and my gut was absolutely right. The red flags quickly multiplied, transforming from subtle anomalies into glaring warning signs I could no longer ignore. Her wardrobe, usually professional and understated, drastically shifted. Suddenly, packages containing expensive lingerie and tight, revealing dresses were arriving on our porch. When I complimented a new outfit, she brushed past me, claiming she just needed a confidence boost for her presentations. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter or the living room sofa, became glued to her hand. If she took a shower, the phone went into the bathroom with her. I noticed she changed her lock screen passcode, abandoning our wedding anniversary date for a random sequence of numbers. One Tuesday night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to an empty bed. I walked downstairs and found her sitting in the dark on the patio, illuminated only by the harsh blue light of her screen. She was smiling, a soft, genuine smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "Who are you talking to at this hour?" I asked gently, stepping out into the cool night air. She jumped as if she had been shocked with a live wire, her thumb frantically swiping to close the application. "God, Mark, you scared me," she hissed, clutching the device to her chest. "It's just Sarah. She's having a crisis with her boyfriend." The next morning, I saw Sarah at a local coffee shop. I bought her a latte and casually mentioned I hoped she was feeling better after her late-night crisis. Sarah looked at me with total bewilderment, stating she had been asleep by 10 o'clock. That evening, I confronted Chloe. "I saw Sarah today. She wasn't awake at 2 in the morning, Chloe. Why did you lie to me?" The color drained from her face for a fraction of a second before her expression hardened into a mask of pure indignation. "Are you tracking my conversations? Are you seriously checking up on me?" she yelled, effectively turning the tables. "You are suffocating me with your insane jealousy, Mark. I can't even breathe in this house anymore." She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the window panes. She was looking at me with pure hatred, and I finally understood exactly why. The suffocating weight of my suspicion finally broke me the following weekend. Chloe was out at a mandatory Saturday strategy session, a convenient excuse that had become a weekly staple. I was moving her car out of the driveway to mow the lawn when a small, crumpled piece of thick paper caught my eye, wedged tightly between the passenger seat and the center console. I pulled it free and felt my blood turn to ice water. It was an itemized receipt from the Grandview, an upscale boutique hotel downtown. It was dated for a Thursday night 2 weeks prior, a night she told me she was staying late at the office to finalize a client presentation. The receipt detailed a luxury suite, room service for 2, and a wildly expensive bottle of champagne. The final blow? The card used for payment belonged to a Julian Hayes. I sat in the driver's seat for an hour, the receipt shaking in my trembling hand, the world spinning violently off its axis. I couldn't confront her. She would just lie, twist it, and call me crazy again. I needed a reality check, so I drove straight to Sarah's apartment. Chloe's sister was the only person who might shoot straight with me. When Sarah opened her door and saw my pale, devastated face, she didn't even ask what was wrong. She just pulled me inside and locked the door. I placed the wrinkled receipt on her kitchen island. "Tell me the truth, Sarah? You know something." Sarah closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling with guilt. "I didn't know for sure, but I saw them together last month at a downtown restaurant. They were holding hands across the table, Mark. She told me it was just a consoling touch because he lost a family member, but the way they looked at each other, it made me sick." Hearing it out loud, validated by her own sister, shattered the last remaining illusions I held about my marriage. My wife was entirely gone. I thanked Sarah, swore her to absolute secrecy, and walked back to my car with a terrifying clarity settling over my mind. The heartbreaking evidence was staring me in the face, and I could no longer look away. I didn't shed a single tear when I got back to our empty house. The agonizing grief had been instantly replaced by a cold, calculating rage. I realized that if I confronted Chloe with just a single hotel receipt and Sarah's vague testimony, she would spin another web of lies. She would gaslight me, move her activities further underground, and I would be trapped in a psychological hell. I needed absolute, irrefutable proof. I needed a weapon. First thing Monday morning, I reached out to a private investigator named Vance, a retired detective in his late 40s with a reputation for absolute discretion and ruthless efficiency. We met in a diner 3 towns over. I slid the hotel receipt and a photo of Julian across the sticky Formica table. "I need everything," I told Vance, my voice eerily calm. "I need the locations, the communications, the financial records. I want to know where they go, what they do, and exactly how long this has been happening." Vance nodded slowly, slipping the documents into a battered leather folder. "Give me 72 hours, he said quietly. The wait was absolute psychological torture. For 3 days, I had to sleep next to a woman I knew was actively betraying me. I made her coffee, I kissed her cheek, and I listened to her complain about the traffic, all while imagining my hands wrapped around her neck. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, Vance sent a heavily encrypted file to my secure email. I locked my office door, pulled down the blinds, and typed in the password with trembling fingers. The folder contained dozens of high-resolution photographs. Chloe and Julian walking out of a motel on the outskirts of town. Chloe kissing him passionately against the side of his Audi. Julian's hand resting intimately on her thigh through a restaurant window. But the most devastating piece of evidence wasn't the photos. Vance had somehow managed to clone her iCloud backup, granting me full access to months of their deleted text message history. I opened the massive spreadsheet, took a deep, shaky breath, and scrolled to the very beginning of their digital timeline. I was completely unprepared for the sheer cruelty of the words glowing on my monitor. Reading the text messages was like watching my own autopsy while still entirely conscious. I sat in my darkened office, scrolling through hundreds of exchanges that documented the systematic destruction of my life. The affair hadn't started a few months ago. It had been going on for over a year. The timestamps detailed morning check-ins, midday rendezvous, and explicit late-night conversations happening while I was asleep just inches away from her. But the physical betrayal, as sickening as it was, paled in comparison to the emotional devastation. They weren't just sleeping together, they were actively laughing at me. I found a text thread dated from the week I was building her custom closet. "Julian, is the handyman still hammering away?" Chloe, "Ugh, yes. He's so eager to please, it's honestly pathetic. I'd rather be under you right now." I violently pushed away from my desk, dry heaving into the wastebasket. They viewed me as a convenient, foolish domestic servant. I provided the stable, comfortable life, while Julian provided the thrill. The absolute worst part came when I searched the messages for the word anniversary. The hits made my blood run freezing cold. "Julian, you really want me at the big 5-year party? Won't the boring husband get suspicious?" Chloe, "Mark? Suspicious? Please. He's totally blind. Besides, it turns me on. I want you sitting right there while he gives his little toast. We can hold hands under the table. It's our anniversary too, babe." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. They were using my anniversary, a party I was paying thousands of dollars for, as a twisted venue to flaunt their secret romance. It was a sick, narcissistic power play. They wanted to humiliate me in my own home, surrounded by my own family, getting a perverse thrill from my total ignorance. The sheer disrespect burned away any lingering sadness, leaving only a dark, bottomless pit of vengeance. I wiped my mouth, grabbed my keys, and headed straight to the bank to secure my financial assets before she could ruin me further. I knew exactly what I had to do, and God help anyone who stood in my path. The drive home from the bank was a blur of raw, guttural pain and blinding clarity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my forearms ached. Every memory of the past 5 years flashed through my mind, tainted and poisoned by the truth. The vacations we took, the holidays we spent with my aging parents, the quiet Sunday mornings drinking coffee on the porch, it was all a beautifully constructed lie. When I pulled into the driveway, Chloe's car was already there. I sat in the driver's seat for a full 10 minutes, staring at the front door. The overwhelming urge to burst inside, scream until my lungs bled, and hurl the printed text messages in her face was almost impossible to resist. I wanted to see her perfect, arrogant mask shatter. I wanted to watch her beg and cry and try to explain away the undeniable proof. But as my hand touched the door handle, I stopped. If I confronted her now, privately, she would simply pack her bags and leave. She would spin a tragic narrative to our friends, claiming we simply grew apart, casting herself as the misunderstood victim of a failing marriage. She and Julian would ride off into the sunset, suffering zero social consequences for their despicable actions. No, private confrontation was far too merciful. They wanted to use my anniversary party as a stage to mock me. I would gladly give them the stage, but I would be the one writing the final act. I took out my phone, composed my face into a calm, pleasant mask, and walked through the front door. Chloe was in the kitchen, casually chopping vegetables for a salad. "Hey, honey," she chimed, not looking up. "How was work?" "It was great." I lied smoothly, walking up behind her and placing a gentle kiss on her shoulder. "Just finalizing some details for the party. It's going to be a night we will never, ever forget." I smiled as she leaned back into my touch, entirely oblivious to her impending doom. The next morning, I officially put the wheels of my revenge into motion. I took a personal day from work and scheduled a secret, emergency meeting with a high-profile divorce attorney named Miller, known in our city for being absolutely ruthless in court. I sat in his plush, leather-bound office and slid the heavy dossier compiled by P.I. Vance across the mahogany desk. Miller adjusted his glasses, flipping through the high-resolution photographs of Chloe and Julian, the cloned financial statements showing Chloe funneling marital funds into joint vacations with her lover, and the color-coded spreadsheets of their explicit text messages. "Well," Miller said dryly, letting out a low whistle. "She certainly left a massive paper trail. In a false state, this is what we call a slam dunk, Mark. What's your objective here?" "I want to protect my assets, keep the house, and ensure she walks away with nothing but the clothes on her back," I stated firmly. "And I want the papers ready to be served next Saturday night." Miller raised an eyebrow. "Saturday night? That's an unusual time for service." "Saturday night is our 5th wedding anniversary party," I explained, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I am going to expose them both in front of our entire family and social circle. I want a process server waiting in the lobby to hand her the divorce papers the second she walks out." Miller actually smiled, a predatory gleam in his eye. "I can arrange that. We will lock down your half of the joint accounts immediately and draft a postnuptial freeze." After leaving the lawyer's office, I met Vance one last time to finalize the technical aspects of my plan. I handed him the layout of the private dining room we had rented at the Grandview, ironically, the same hotel where she had been sleeping with Julian. We needed to ensure the venue's audiovisual equipment could flawlessly interface with my laptop. Everything had to be meticulously organized so that when the moment came, there would be zero technical glitches. I returned home with a locked flash drive sitting heavy in my jacket pocket, holding the digital explosive that would obliterate my marriage. The final 7 days leading up to the anniversary party were an exercise in supreme psychological torture. I was living in a bizarre, dual reality. On the outside, I played the role of the excited, doting husband. I finalized the floral arrangements, confirmed the champagne order, and even surprised Chloe with a beautiful, expensive tennis bracelet. "Oh, Mark, it's stunning," she had gasped, throwing her arms around my neck and kissing me deeply. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed not to physically shove her away. The hypocrisy was physically nauseating. Meanwhile, I was quietly moving my most prized personal possessions, heirlooms from my grandfather, critical financial documents, and sentimental items, out of the house and into a secure storage unit. I couldn't risk her destroying my things in a fit of rage once the truth came out. Every time she left the room, I checked the cloned iCloud feed on my secure tablet. The texts between her and Julian were escalating in their cruelty. "Julian, you're wearing the green dress, right? The one that's easy to slip off?" "Chloe, obviously. Mark bought me a bracelet to match. He's so clueless, it's almost adorable. See you Saturday, handsome." I read those words while sitting on the edge of our marital bed, listening to the shower running down the hall. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, marveling at my own restraint. There were moments when the anger boiled so high in my chest I thought I might have a heart attack. I would grip the edges of the bathroom sink until my fingers went numb, practicing my breathing, repeating my mantra, "Saturday. Just wait until Saturday." I knew that if I broke character now, I would ruin the masterpiece I was carefully building. On Friday night, we lay in bed, the lights off, the house completely silent. "I'm so excited for tomorrow," Chloe whispered into the darkness, her hand lightly resting on my chest. "Me too," I replied, staring wide-eyed at the ceiling. "It's going to change everything for us." The countdown clock in my head finally hit 0, and the day of reckoning had arrived. Saturday evening arrived with a heavy, suffocating humidity. The private dining room at the Grandview looked spectacular, bathed in candlelight and overflowing with white roses. I stood near the entrance, dressed in a sharp black suit, greeting my family and our mutual friends. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering how proud she was of our beautiful marriage. Chloe was holding court near the bar, looking absolutely stunning in the emerald green silk dress Julian had requested. She was laughing, tossing her hair, playing the perfect hostess to absolute perfection. And then, the door opened, and Julian walked in. He was wearing a tailored navy suit, oozing a sickening aura of unearned confidence. He spotted Chloe, and they exchanged a brief, electrifying glance, a secret language I now fully understood. My heart hammered wildly against my ribs, but I forced my face into a welcoming, relaxed smile. I walked directly over to him, extending my hand. "Julian, right?" I asked loudly, ensuring the nearby guests could hear. "Chloe has told me so much about you. Thanks for coming to celebrate with us." Julian grasped my hand firmly, flashing a brilliant, arrogant smile. "Mark, it's an honor. Chloe is an incredible woman. You're a very lucky guy." The sheer audacity of the man shaking my hand while actively sleeping with my wife sent a surge of adrenaline straight through my veins. "Oh, I know exactly how lucky I am," I replied smoothly, not breaking eye contact. "Please, grab a drink. The show is about to start." I watched him walk away to join Chloe, who shot me a nervous but approving smile for being so accommodating to her coworker. I saw them stand shoulder to shoulder, their hands subtly brushing against each other behind the drape of the tablecloth. The guests began taking their seats, the clinking of silverware signaling the start of the dinner service. I checked my phone. A text from my lawyer confirmed the process server was waiting in the lobby. I walked to the head of the long table, picking up my glass of champagne and a silver spoon. The room quieted down, all eyes turning to look at the happy husband. "Family, friends, thank you all so much for being here tonight," I began, my voice projecting clearly across the hushed dining room. 5 years ago, Chloe and I stood in front of many of you and made promises to each other. Promises of loyalty, of unwavering support, and of profound honesty. I paused, looking directly at Chloe, who smiled sweetly, completely oblivious. They say that marriage is about truly knowing your partner. It's about seeing behind the mask they present to the world and loving the person underneath. Well, over the past few months, I've gotten to know a side of my wife that I never, ever knew existed. A soft, approving murmur went through the crowd. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. I took a slow sip of my champagne, letting the tension build. Chloe has been incredibly busy lately, working late nights, giving her absolute all to her career. And I've been so incredibly proud of her dedication. I shifted my gaze slightly down the table, locking eyes with Julian. She's even found time to mentor her new colleague, Julian, who we are so thrilled could join our intimate family gathering tonight. Julian gave a modest, tight-lipped nod. Chloe's smile faltered just a fraction of an inch. She sensed a strange shift in my tone, but she couldn't quite identify the threat. In fact, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, losing its warm, celebratory lilt. Chloe has been so dedicated to Julian that she's been spending more time in his hotel rooms than in our own home. The room instantly froze. The silence was so absolute, so heavy, that you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning unit. Someone dropped a fork, the clatter echoing violently. Chloe's face drained of all color, her jaw dropping slightly as the horrible reality of my words washed over her. "Mark, what? What are you doing?" she stammered, her voice a desperate, breathy whisper. "I'm giving my anniversary toast, darling," I replied coldly, reaching behind me to grab the small remote control for the venue's projector system. "I'm just getting to the absolute best part of the story." I pressed the button on the remote. The massive projection screen behind me hummed to life, bathing the dim room in a harsh, bright light. The first image was massive, impossible to ignore, a high-resolution photograph of Chloe and Julian aggressively making out against the hood of his Audi in a dark parking lot. Gasps erupted across the dining table. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. "Mark, stop it. Turn that off," Chloe shrieked, jumping up from her chair crashing backward onto the carpet. She lunged toward me, but Sarah, who had known what was coming, stepped firmly into the aisle, blocking her sister's path. "Sit down and shut up, Chloe," Sarah snapped, her voice trembling with disgust. I clicked the remote again. The screen shifted to a massive screenshot of their text messages. I read them aloud, my voice echoing off the walls. "He's so eager to please, it's honestly pathetic. I'd rather be under you right now. That was from the week I built your custom closet, Chloe." I clicked again. Another text illuminated the room. "I want you sitting right there while he gives his little toast. We can hold hands under the table." "Well, Julian," I said, turning my icy stare onto the affair partner, who was now pale and shrinking into his seat. "Are you enjoying the toast?" Chaos immediately erupted. Chloe's father slammed his fists onto the table, his face purple with rage, turning to scream at his daughter. Julian frantically grabbed his coat, scrambling to get out of his chair, muttering apologies to nobody in particular. "You are pathetic," I told him, loud enough for the entire room to hear over the shouting. "You can have her. She's officially your problem now." I reached under my chair, grabbed a thick manila envelope containing the printed evidence, and tossed it onto the center of the dining table, scattering the white rose centerpieces. Chloe was sobbing hysterically, sinking to her knees on the floor, her perfect facade entirely shattered in front of everyone she respected. The mask had completely slipped, revealing the ugly, undeniable truth to the entire world. The private dining room had devolved into an absolute war zone. Chloe was on the floor, weeping violently, grasping at Sarah's legs, begging her sister for help. Sarah simply pulled her skirt away, looking down at Chloe as if she were a total stranger. "Don't touch me," Sarah spat. "You did this to yourself." Across the room, Julian was literally sprinting for the exit, but my father, a man who rarely raised his voice, stepped directly into his path. "You are a cowardly piece of garbage," my father growled, shoving Julian hard in the chest before stepping aside to let the terrified man flee the room. My mother was sobbing quietly, being comforted by my aunt. The waitstaff stood frozen near the kitchen doors, unsure of what to do. I stood at the head of the table, breathing heavily, the adrenaline slowly beginning to crash. I looked down at the woman I had spent 5 years loving, the woman I had built my entire life around. She looked up at me, mascara running down her cheeks, her eyes pleading for a mercy I absolutely did not possess. "Mark, please, it meant nothing. It was a stupid, meaningless mistake," she wailed, her voice cracking. "A year-long mistake with hundreds of hotel receipts." I replied, my voice dead and hollow. "Save it for the judge, Chloe." I turned around, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked calmly down the length of the table. The crowd parted for me. I didn't look back as I pushed through the heavy wooden double doors and walked into the hotel lobby. True to his word, Miller's process server was standing by the reception desk. I nodded to him, signaling that the target was inside. I walked out through the revolving glass doors and stepped into the cool, humid night air. I took a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the crushing weight of the last month finally lift off my shoulders. I was walking away from my marriage entirely alone, but for the first time in a year, I was entirely free. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back. The aftermath of that night was swift and utterly brutal. The divorce was finalized in less than 6 months. With the mountain of undeniable evidence, the financial tracking of marital funds spent on the affair, and the absolute destruction of her social standing, Chloe didn't even try to fight me in court. Miller absolutely decimated her. I kept the house, my pension, and my dignity. Chloe was forced to move into a tiny apartment across town, and Julian, true to his cowardly nature, dumped her the second the scandal threatened his job at the PR firm. She tried to reach out to me a few times, leaving desperate voicemails about therapy and second chances, but I changed my number and blocked her on everything. Healing has not been a linear process. There are still nights when I wake up reaching for a phantom presence on the other side of the bed. Betrayal leaves a deep, jagged scar that aches when the weather gets cold. But through intense therapy and the unwavering support of my family, and surprisingly, Sarah, who remains a good friend, I have slowly rebuilt my sense of self-worth. I learned that my value as a human being is not tied to how much I can sacrifice for someone else's ambition. I learned that true love does not require you to shrink yourself to make your partner look bigger. If you are ever faced with the agonizing reality of infidelity, my biggest piece of practical advice is this: do not confront them immediately. Gather your proof quietly, secure your finances ruthlessly, and control the narrative before they can twist it against you. Today, I am sitting on the porch of the house I kept, drinking a cup of hot coffee while watching the sunrise over the neighborhood. The air is crisp, the house is perfectly quiet, and the future is finally mine to write. I survived the absolute worst betrayal imaginable, and I came out the other side entirely unbreakable.